our topic today is about facilitating better collaborative learning capacity, and we're focusing on English language learners. Just so that we know what your context is, can I have some idea as how many of you are in teaching and you're thinking of how do I deal with English language learners' language barrier in a teaching context? How many of you are in research? So teaching? Okay, most of you, okay. And what about in library, research? Yes. And what others would there be? What other categories?
I probably don't think enough about learning, people who are learning English as a second language, but I can particularly, how do we deal with the collaboration, and how do we deal with it online, and what are the best ways, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. So I'll remember to deal with that. And is there another category I've not covered?
I'm supporting the clients in technology usage. So I'm interested in knowing more about the collaborative technologies or collaborative teams.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. What we're trying to do then is to say, well, we really want students to be engaged, our clients to be engaged, but because we have expectations about collaboration in the tasks we set students, what are these obstacles that these students who come from different cultures and have who are operating in maybe their second, third, fourth, or even fifth language, how are they going to cope with the need to deal with scholarly language, things that they have to be reading in order to collaborate, plus the other group dynamics. So I will go through very quickly, at least now I know where our focus needs to be. So as a quick outline, we'll go through the challenges that they would face in collaborative work and group work. And I'm going to focus on what I think would be a key issue at the very root of the problem, the lack of vocabulary in order to cope with the reading part. And for group dynamics, do they have the language to understand the nuances of interaction and so on? And we're going to share a little bit of our research, continuing research on journal articles, which a lot of students have to deal with in their studies, and to share with you a new tool that we have in place in order to remove a good part of that obstacle so that they can participate. So think about what research I've just done, just one example. Now, the research that shows that when students are English language learners are trying to engage in group work, we can kind of group their obstacles or the challenges into the cognitive category, the affective part, the emotional part, the anxiety, etc., and the social cultural. Now, the cognitive part is pretty intuitive in that we know that if they cannot cope with the kinds of text they need to be reading, if they don't have the language in order to do a search for library terms, if they don't have the language to scan what they've just searched for with the term, it brings out so many different texts, how do they narrow down what they need to be selecting as here is our area of focus. Those obstacles are generally not talked about, but they are real problems because for many of these students, as we see in a later slide, if every few word is going to hamper them, it is a really daunting task. So that's the cognitive part with the reading on their own. But there's also the language for dealing with group communication. And some research have shown that if there's group work, there are other fluent speakers who feel, well, those students are not going to contribute much. And these students report that they feel unwelcome. Some of these students report that they feel other members who are more fluent position them as less of a contributor, less valuable. and ignore what they have to contribute. However, there's another body of research that shows that really we can get these students to contribute. The diversity of perspectives they bring would be very enriching, very valuable to the collaborative work. So the key then is how do we mediate that and help to reduce these problems with the language. The effective part, the students report the anxiety level they feel with having got to work in the groups because they feel unwelcome. They feel anxious about the ability to produce the output that's expected. They have fears. They don't quite understand a lot of what they're reading. Imagine if I don't speak Japanese, but if I have the sunny function in Japan, it is really daunting. So what we'd like to get to is the root of the problem. If we can just, I think, help them deal with the vocabulary, that will remove a lot of the barriers. It will reduce the anxiety and will allow them to be engaging. So what does it take to help students acquire the type of vocabulary they need for academic assignments? I'm assuming that most of you would be thinking in terms of engaging your students or clients in the kind of text that that look like academic articles, serious reports, and so on, right? So that's the language that students feel not prepared for. So we think, now, how do we, first, remember I talked about the effective factors. How do we get students to feel that's the task? How do we make that seem doable to them? Because when it seems so daunting, a lot of students will shy away, or they will procrastinate because it's too much to deal with right now. Let's do that next week, and it leads to a host of other problems. So we thought if we can show that even peer-reviewed articles are not as difficult as students think. So we look at language. Let's look at the vocabulary. What kind of different vocabulary are there in peer-reviewed articles? Because that seems really tough to deal with. So that's where a lot of calculations has been going on, and so we will share that later. So we also look at what's the potential for vocabulary acquisition, because we think that we can start somewhere with the students and they feel that they can build a vocabulary in the process of engaging with the task, and in the process of engaging with the collaborative task, they have the tools to be able to contribute part of the way. Then it will help with the group dynamics, because the group members will not feel that they are not contributing so far because they've said nothing. So this is where I'm trying to get you to understand where we're going. So we took a paragraph from one of the journal articles and did an analysis, and what these boxes are, they're not random words. We are assuming that a student is going to that text, they're reading, and let's say they have only 1,000 common English words in their vocabulary, if they're of that level. What will the text look like to them? All these words will be blanks, they don't understand, and they'll have to look up these words in order to understand the text. But and all these colors mean different things. The green boxes refer to the second 1,000 most common words in English. The yellow boxes refer to those academic words found across, which research has shown runs across various disciplines. So here are the common words. Now, it is a bit better if the student has the top 2,000 most common words in English in their vocabulary. but still it's too difficult to deal with the text. But if they had that, plus the academic words, I think that's key. They can cover about 95% of the text they're reading. So the goal then is to say, how do we help students so that if they have to look up, in the process of looking up, they can be expanding, acquiring the language they need. So the methodology we did was to sample about 20 peer-reviewed articles from different disciplines, pass them into levels of words at 3 basic levels from a very useful tool that's online, which is a vocab profiler. And so we divided them into 3 categories. Here's an example of the kinds of articles we chose to do this analysis. And as you can see, they cover different fields, and they are journal articles, things which are very difficult to read. Now, just to give you an example, one of the articles was this. Now, really, although the article seems to be made up of, like, it's a long article, it could be 11,000 words, it could be 23,000 words, but when you break it down like this, there's lots of repetitions. Sure, the student with limited vocabulary will recognize this, but these function words are not enough. I'm going to run through this very quickly. Common words from the first 1,000 words are also repeated several times. You notice this from the second 1,000 words, and you begin to see a pattern that there's lots of repetition in a long article from among the content words. And here are the academic words. So here's where Sohee will explain how we have looked at all these different texts. And do you want to take this on, or shall I? Right.
Okay, so we scanned the 20 different articles from various disciplines, and then as you can see that the first variable is the total number of words, and then second one is the total number of unique words out of all contents, and then the third one is the unique content words. So we can read of the function word like and da and things like that. So.
Oh, sorry.
So if you look at it, the shortest articles was total number was 807. The maximum number was 23 and 1,170. And the average number of words is like 7944. However, if you only count the unique word, you can how much they reduce as the 437 to 2,487. So average number of unique word is about 1,500. And if you only count for unique content word, then they reduce more. This one is a little bit estimated by the average repetition of the word. So I use the estimated. It's not exact number, estimated number. So minimum number is 292.8. And the maximum number of unique content word is 1,093. It's only based on 20 articles, but you can see that how much the number got reduced.
To this.
Yeah, so that the number of unique word, the average number of unique content words students has to acquire is actually 900, about 12, which is manageable. So if you're just looking at the articles, and the students got intimidated, like 10 pages and research articles and English as a second learners, and they're gonna be scared of reading this one. But actually, if you only count the unique content word, you can see it's a manageable scale. They can acquire this one through the semester.
All right, thank you, Sohee. And so although we're showing that it's manageable, we are not saying this is the first line of acquisition of language, but we're using this to show it is manageable and reading can be used to be expanding the vocabulary, acquiring the language they need to be able to contribute. Now, I'd like to bring in this piece of research which shows that in order to help students participate in group discussions, or listen to lectures, etc., all spoken text, well, for 98% comprehension rate, they need about 6,000 to 7,000 word families. The reason why a lot of students keep quiet during discussions is because they feel they don't have the language to express themselves. They can't pick up fast enough from the discussion that's going on in order to get into the discussion. And by the time they process, because of the limited word capacity, it's gone on. So they have missed the chance to be able to contribute. So really, we really have to address the core of the matter, that's the vocabulary. I use word families to refer to words which are related. So let's say if you talk about the word explore, other members of the family would be exploring, what else? Explorer, exploration, explored, underexplored, that's one word family. So we are trying to say what is the minimum students should have so that they can contribute well. 98% comprehension of reading text, they need more word families. It's understandable because written texts are a lot more difficult to understand. So when we look at this and say if we were to start seeing from a student's perspective when looking at text, how can we divide, how can we have an insight about their view? So then we look at, shall I take this? Okay,
Yeah, so there are group 1, G1, G2, G3. So the first group of students only had 1,000 word list, and G2 is the 2,000, and G3 is the plus the academic word. And then from here, we can kind of estimate how many words they have to look up if you already have this knowledge. And then we get the estimated number of each articles if the students is belonging to first group, second group, and third group. But this one is the absolute number in a sense that we didn't rescale in terms of the how big the article size is, right? So this is not a good measure. So I kind of make it as a percent. So out of whole unique content word, how many words students has to look up if they are belong to the first group and second group and third group. Right? Makes sense, right? So that is the data generated.
And one moment.
Yeah.
As you can notice that students in the first two groups, so if you are trying to put on the lens of a student with only 1,000 words in the vocabulary, then they have to look up 33% of the text they're reading for the first article. But the second, for the student with 2,000 words in the vocabulary, they need to look up a bit less. But you see the big drop when they have the 2,000 words plus the academic words, then they don't need to look up so much. It's only about 9% of the text. So then it looks like the key is how can we help them with the academic words, because that seems to be the big difference. How can we get them to acquire those words so that it frees them to be able to contribute?
Okay, so this one is just showing the side-by-side box plot based on the group 1 and 2 and 3. So in other words, what is the average percent that students has to look up if you belong to the first group? It's about the average 34%, and if you belong to second group, it's about 28%, and if you belong to third group, it's like 17%. And as you can see that the dropping ratio is not as linear. It's a little bit like quadratic drop. So I wanted to form the statistical analysis about this. Is there any significant difference between three groups of students in their the percentage of the lookup and when they do the study for the different groups? And because our data is a bit small, only 20, and as you can see the box plot, there's outliers. I'm a statistics teacher, so we cannot do the formal ANOVA test.
Is that right?
Yeah, so as you can see, box plot, those dots means outlier. So counterpart of the ANOVA test is the non-parametric test, the Kruskal-Wallis. And Kruskal-Wallis test showing that the p-value is extremely small, means that there is a very strong evidence that there is a significant percentage difference between group 1 and group 2 and group 3.
Thank you very much, Sohee. So then it's seeing one extra value of seeing those group 1, group 2, group 3s, it gives us an idea of the developmental profile. if we can get students quickly up from group 1 to group 2 to be able to at least function at group 3 level, they are in a pretty good state to be able to participate meaningfully in collaborative work. So, I will now do a live demo of what we are trying to do with helping students acquire those academic words. So I'm going to take you to something on our website. All right, we have this tool here. We call it an vocabulary expansion accelerator, or VIA for short. So what this online tool does is, if a student has to be reading something, the student just has to paste the text in. So let's say a student is reading, let's say they're reading this article online. So I'll do a Control-C, and then I'll paste it in here. Where is it? All right. And remember, we said that if students, we can help them acquire the academic words, it'll make a big difference to how they read. So the students will be encouraged to click these two boxes on academic word list and essential academic words, and then just submit. My screen is too small to do this. Okay. Oh, sorry, I forgot this here. So in a pinch, they can see here are the academic words as they're reading. So, and as you saw in my earlier slides, lots of these words are repeated many times, even in a long article, a 7,000 word article, maybe there are only 900 over different content words. So they're going to see repetitions of many words, and that will help them become familiar with it. But what is more important is, if a student doesn't know the meaning of a word, they just have to click and they can read. So, so they know the meaning of it. So for any word that they don't know, they check. So if you recall my earlier slide where I had that paragraph with those boxes would be lookup points for all those students. So if they have only 1,000 words in the vocabulary, so they are just, the lower level users of English, then they have to look up many more words. And because there's this tool, they can just look up any word and read on without worrying about making a list or memorizing, etc. So what does this mean? The student in the G1 category will have to look up more words. The students in G2 category will look up fewer words. The students in G3 will have much fewer words to do. But whatever level they are at, if a student uses this tool, they could immediately participate in the discussion because they can see the meaning. And plus, as they see the meanings of words, they begin to see how they could express their ideas better in simpler terms. So what we're trying to say is, how do we address the problems that students are facing with the language? One is to have this tool available. So at the point of researching for material, doing a library research, copy and paste the text if they are deciding, do a quick check of meanings, look up whatever they need to look up, decide whether it's relevant or not. If they are participating in a group project and they're all sitting at a table, or whether they're working online, they could be checking on this and trying to formulate. At least it helps them develop the language they need to participate, whether it's online or in a spoken face-to-face situation, and then they can, they're not left behind. So coming back to my earlier slide, remember I had 3 blocks, the cognitive, affective, and social cultural. We're thinking in that block, there's so much language component. like this. If we look at this again, you see so much of language now can be addressed, because if a student continuously use this tool as they read, and because by nature there's so much repetition of words in text, the students will acquire the language. Now, back to implications, pedagogical implications. Would journal articles be a good way to get students familiar with these texts? I would say no. Because although the words are repeated many times, the way they are written isn't the easiest way for students to understand the context. But what this tool will help students with is that they have to read those journal articles anyway. Now they have a tool to help them with it. But I would say the students should be reading newspaper articles, reading easier reading materials, and build up their vocabulary by all the lookups that they can do, they can be done with this. So as they build up more vocabulary, they can see a very steep increase in the language ability. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Sometimes reading newspapers is not actually as good as reading more scholarly writing, because newspapers use more idiomatic language that may not make sense in context, right, for learners. So I actually think it's a really good use of the tool. Not only do they have to use, not only do they have to read the articles, but in many cases the articles may be easier to parse long term than idiomatic language in popular writing.
Very important point, Joanna, for bringing this up. There is a huge difference in general newspaper language. I don't remember the exact source, but I remember somewhere years ago reading something about newspaper articles have to be written within a certain word limit with the language level that's accessible to, I think, was it at least grade 10 readers or grade 11 readers, so that everybody can be reading those newspaper articles. But even within newspaper articles, there's a difference between front page news and perhaps the editorial. However, looking at the whole spectrum of students we have, if we can get some of them reading in the first place, is a huge step forward, because I hear a number of students who tell me, I don't like reading. I don't even like reading in my language. Now I have to read in English. So for those students, I'll say, go read, even if you read a sports page, even if you read technology page in newspaper, read what you are interested in, because effective factor. The motivation to read is there. And because if they use this tool, they'll find many of those words that they're going to find useful in the academic text appearing in those articles. They would have a friendlier medium to be acquiring the language. Now back to Joanna's point, it's a very important point. The way the students write in English for academic purposes is quite different from the style they would use for a casual drop a note and email to mom and dad or to a friend, etc. The students need to be able to express their writing in a more formal, scholarly way. How are they going to acquire that formal, scholarly way if they don't have interaction with those texts? Because it's too difficult for them. So if it's too difficult for them, they'll avoid it. Natural human instinct. But now by taking that pain away, hopefully now we can say, use it, read it. Now those articles which were not accessible to you before, they're accessible now. So now I can encourage faculty to say, if you want to have group work in your classes for, say, 15-minute group work, that's something the students read and discuss, students can just use this. Even the student who doesn't have the language needed to participate can at least now advance a little bit of the idea because they understand the problem. And they have the language to at least, participate. And the more proficient students could be trained to be able to say, well, this is collaborative group work. How do I solicit the thoughts of somebody who has been quiet? So then it's dealing with group dynamics about how the more able students could be nurtured to be able to engage the quieter students who have all these cultural and language barriers by asking, and it says this, what do you think? Now, the student who doesn't know that word can just kind of veer that word, find out the meaning and think about it, at least have a chance to say something. So we're hoping that slowly we are trying to define for students the core vocabulary they should have, which would be the common words plus the academic words, which will allow them to access lots of text and to be able to participate in it. So given digital pedagogy, I think digital pedagogy is a huge step forward for a lot of these students who are struggling with trying to bring up the level of language to the level that they need to be engaging effectively, because now, because it's digital, it's possible to make a tool like that in order to support them so that they don't have to wait and say, well, I can't do that yet. I will have to pass through all these hoops before my language is enough, and along the way, lots of other confounding factors come into play. Now, with technology able to support us, now we can say, well, we can try doing this. You could, look at just this paragraph. You could be talking about getting, simpler prompts, putting things in bite size, and there's always this access to this backup. So we are thinking of moving this further. Okay, well, all right. So all these would be the words that they look up. Now it's easy for them to look up. All right, the other thing that I would also show about this tool, which I've forgotten to do so when we were at that tool. Now, the other thing that we can do with this tool is for students to say, well, I still don't know how to express my ideas. Why can't I move this up? Okay. For example, they're reading a text and they feel, I wish I could write like that, but it's beyond me. But at least they can aspire to something. They can try to express at least some ideas within the structure that's there, so that they don't have to totally, fall flat. For example, if a student is trying to submit a piece of writing to the prof or to write somewhere, they have to. The student's got to think, how do I compose my thoughts? How do I write it in such a way that it makes sense to the reader? How do I, how should I say, how do I contribute to my group work? Because every one of us needs to be submitting a paragraph, let's say. But I don't have those skills in order to even get my ideas in. Well, the second feature of this allows students to build up this skill. Of course, it'll take time, but at least it's a first step forward. And this would be sending whatever text they're reading to the skill builder. I'll just choose intermediate. Okay. I don't know if these pop-ups are a good idea. I've yet to see how users say about them, but we thought we have pop-ups to remind them of tips they can use. So what this does is the text that was highlighted just now, gets sent over to this tool, and parts of the text is taken off. So what will the student have to do then? They try and reconstruct the text. Because they have to reconstruct the text, they've got to be reading. They've got to be reading the paragraph. So what does that mean? It is almost like learning to ride the bike and having those training wheels on, right? Little kids learning to ride a bike. So they're trying to express, these are not their words, but at least they try and get a sense of sentence structure. And then if they have to be contributing the paragraph, they, as they go through, I feel now these students are not coming to us as an empty slate. All these English language learners who come to us have lots of experiences in that culture. It's just that they are temporarily hampered by the language. So they have lots of ideas. Even as they try and reconstruct, they will have ideas about what they want to say in this project. So as they reconstruct, they get a sense of what they want to say, perhaps use some of the language. I think they will at least have something to contribute. So I'm going to show you, by completing this part, are we supposed to end now? Am I late? How much time do I have?
20 minutes to the hour.
Oh, okay.
So we have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Then I'll show a little bit more of this. So assuming the student has to read, now as the student reads, oh, I don't know this word. Okay, that's the meaning. So as they're trying to complete the text and they don't know some words, go. All right? All right, let's try and complete this. Can you help me? Do some right and some wrong so you can see the impact. What should this be? Sir?
Series.
Okay, series. All right, being the 50th speaker raises. All right, do you see what's happening here? You only know the first part of the word and you're trying to figure out what completes it. So for the English language learner, decision making as to what is the right term makes them think about the language which they could otherwise, if they had to write themselves, they would avoid using some of these words. But now they're forced to use these words. So they're forced to stretch the linguistic resources. What do we say about this?
Acadian.
Okay, sure. Okay, what is this then? I'll take your word now. How shall we finish this? Apprehension? Okay, let's do. And this one? What shall we have?
Acapulco?
Okay, how would you spell that?
P-P-U-L-C-O, maybe? P-U.
Doesn't mean that's one piece.
One P, okay. Can't just spell.
Okay. All right, and simply. All right. So the student completes finishing this text. And so the student can now submit. You get immediate feedback. Where is it? Immediate feedback as to what is correct. All the green will be correct, and of course all the pink is wrong. So what it does is then it's almost game-like, and the student can try. We are pushing them into usage of the language, and in the process, giving them an opportunity to use proper language of a relevant text. Maybe as a result, they can write something along those lines. And if they do enough of this, I think they get a better sense of language structure anyway. So hopefully then so when it comes to collaborative work, we're giving them a chance now by removing some of these barriers, and they can actually participate. So hopefully we have less of other students saying, no, we don't want to have them in the group. That's going to pull down a group grade. But if they bring in new perspectives now, the group work becomes more original. So there's more inclusivity in class for assignments. I'm open to taking questions. Okay, what we are trying to do, I forgot to mention the next part. So what we're trying to do in the next part is to look at how users report how they're using it, any challenges. And I'd like to find out from you guys, looking at this, what kinds of things we think we should anticipate. How could we make this a more useful tool for students, for users? Think of the people that you're dealing with. Because by and by, hopefully soon, we are going to, get out of this experimental stage and make it available to all. So what do you think?
Oh, so that's why we can't log in with our UTIDs yet.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
No,
Because I
we-
tried to go on and sort of start seeing where it was, but.
All right, sorry.
No,
because,
that's helpful.
So I want
I
to
would-
know from your ideas, what else you think we should be thinking about before we make this open to all?
You guys, can you pop it again? I'll show you something. So if you're on a word, pick any word that you get a definition for.
Sorry, if we are where?
So if you play over honor,
Honor?
and you can click on it and you get a definition,
Yes.
you get a definition of any of the words within the definition.
Okay, I
If I
don't.
didn't know what the word proud was, that doesn't help.
Right. Okay, let me try that. I don't know. It's never occurred to us to check that. So let me see if that is possible. No. So I guess there are some words that's being used by the dictionary to define those words. Those words are assumed to be words people know. So I guess the way to learn these words, perhaps learn this separately, or read enough so that the word proud is in the text. Or the other thing the student could do is get out of this and put proud in and just check the meaning of proud, for example.
I think
But
it's
too
a very
much.
good
Very good
suggestion.
point.
When I was learning English, that was one of my worst frustrations.
So
I
the
don't understand the definition.
definition, good point, okay, remember that.
And you might go into a loop where
Yeah.
proud links back to honor and you're going to have to
Yeah, I
go all
know.
start, but it
Right.
might help if the sophomores already got or already
Okay.
on
And because proud would be a word that comes out in common everyday language, maybe suggesting to students that they should have a balance between scholarly text that they're reading and general, exciting, narratives, stories, etc., which builds the general vocabulary. The word proud would have been covered in some of those.
And also to go a little bit further with this, if you've got it there and
Yes.
you want them to try and pick up some of the speaking skills too, I don't know if you could have a pronunciation guide. I don't know that.
We were hoping to do that and in the next phase so that they hear the word and they see the meaning of the word. That is next phase. Thank you for that.
Basically, what you could include is, like the links to synonyms and antonyms. Like, they don't know what proud means. If they look for a synonym for honor, then that's something they can click on and will lead to the definition that you understand.
Right, okay. Yeah, I think that would be interesting if we could have that a little box maybe somewhere there, if they come across the word proud, key in and then separate meaning. So very good point. Thank you for that. Any other?
Maybe I'll stop the proceedings here just because we do have to go to a break, but then we can keep talking about this wonderful tool. I'm really excited about it. Bring it back to Ryerson once it's developed. We can talk about it over the break. So first of all, thank you both very much.